Hi guys and girls, Mark Crossfield here. Today we're going to talk about iron setup mistakes that I still see golfers make, that I just think if you didn't make these mistakes you would save some serious shots off your games, and they're like really cheap and easy. Just don't fall foul to these mistakes and you'll just shave a few better shots off your game by just being that little bit more precise in everything that you do. These are cheats, they're simple, easy. Don't be lazy golfers. Don't make these mistakes. So number one, and this is the key one for me, this is the one that you see so many golfers make, and I mean good players as well as new golfers as well. And it's thinking about the relationship between the face, your hands, and the shaft lean and how they link up. So what I mean by that is I'm holding the club in a way that the club is designed to be set up and then in turn nearly delivered. So really, let's take it to extremes. So if I put the club like this and then do a great hold, my hold's now not in relationship to this face, so I have to twist the face back and put some lean in. Now my grip's in a completely different position. Obviously I butchered that loads at the start, but I still see students getting these relationships mixed up. This is the most common one I see. So I see people setting the club down, so let's have the face pointing somewhere near where I want that ball to start, but they have the handle level with the face or back. Then what they do is they put their hands on. So let's say I'm trying to see 2.5 knuckles, which I see, trail hand here goes on, and then they start taking their setup and they think, oh, hang on, my hands need to start opposite the inside of my lead leg with this club. So what they do is they then push their hands forward. Now the club face has moved, it's pointing further right. So now what happens is they then turn the face back in to point it where they want it to go. And I can now only see 1 knuckle. So in effect, because I've not held the club in a gaming position, so that can be done at the ball, I can do it in the air, but by taking that lean away and then holding, putting it in secondary, then turning, it's really funking my grip up. It's making my grip not be in the position I'm actually training it to be. Now what happens is we see people hitting the ball off to the right because the face is not controlled, or they just edge the hands back just to make sure the face is square. Then we see kind of these very common impacts back here where they're flipping it forwards, hitting the ground first, finning it, hitting over high iron shots as well. So we need to get the relationship between the face, the handle lean, and your hold really synced up at the start. So let's think about the order that you connect yourself to the club in to make sure we sync them up. So I've got a 6 iron and a 9 iron here, so my longest iron and my shortest iron before I go to a wedge. Now I play these two shots from slightly different ball positions. The 9 iron's a bit further back than the 6, so what you can see is the shaft lean is slightly different. So for each club you've got to understand how much shaft lean you need. Now a good rule of thumb is trying to get with your irons your hands opposite the inside of your lead leg. Good way of checking that is once you're all set up, just drop them down and see if they hit the inside of your lead leg. And then obviously subject to the ball position, that will create more or less shaft lean. Depending, like my lowest iron here, a 6, which is really lofted like a 5, I'm pushing it slightly forward because I don't want it going in too low. So your ball positions will change slightly, which means that the handle lean will change. You need to understand what handle lean you need at the beginning, and that's a great checkpoint for you. So now when I'm trying to establish my grip, I'm making sure the face is pointing where I want the ball to start and the handle is forward. Then I'm assessing and taking my grip. I'm gripping that club in that position. And I'm doing that if I'm taking my grip from back here, I've still got the handle lean in with the face pointing forwards. For lots of golfers, doing it down by the ball, so face with the handle lean, then set the grip, or all simultaneously, set the handle lean with the lead hand and twist the amount of knuckles on. Again, ball position now set. So for me, 9 iron, I've got it much more in the middle, but I've still got the handle forwards. As soon as you start seeing people, most common one is the handle back. I see this so common, handle back, grip on. There's the 2 knuckles my coach said I need to do. Hang on, that doesn't feel right, need to be more here. Hang on, face isn't right, turn that back, grip's now completely compromised. Let's get these syncing up. You're gonna have so much more control of the club face if you do. Setup mistake with irons number 2. Again, they're lazy mistakes, but you're seeing so common. People do get very narrow with their irons, so quite narrow width for stances. I'd like to see more verging on the slightly wider size. Certainly if you're someone who gets a little bit floppy in your irons, in your swing, maybe you're not so good at getting hips turning and shoulders turning a bit more, so creating kind of ideas of coil in your backswing. Getting overly narrow where it feels comfortable with an iron, because you're often not smashing it as hard as you would with a driver, where people sometimes do stand a little bit more aggressively. By being overly narrow, you definitely see students get quite floppy in their legs, and this is what's creating those horrible strikes for lots of golfers, where they're bottoming the club out early or not even touching the ground and just finning or topping it. So let's make sure we get a good width for stance, and it can get slightly wider as you go up through clubs, but a good rule of thumb, try and get the insides of your feet around the same width of your hips. And then what you can do to check that is literally just drop a club down. So the insides of my middle of my feet, you can see, so from here to here is around the same width of my hips. This is good for creating a little bit of coil, a little bit of resistance in that lower half, but still enough mobility to be able to move and swing and get myself turning. Let's make sure we get away. Really tempting for golfers, get far too narrow with their irons. Good solid swing, make some good solid coils. You're going to find the strikes just fall into a much neater place if you set yourself up in a way that allows you to actually dynamically move with your lower half. Now the third one, and this is huge. It's like I see this so often with amateur golfers, where with good players I see them playing with this idea, but they wouldn't even know to articulate it to another person. They just do it so instinctively. Now that's thinking about the lie of the club, and then in turn the posture, and then in turn the swings that can be created around the different lies of the club. So what I mean by lie is how much, say, toe up, heel up, level on the ground, little bit of toe up, little bit of heel up. So the lie of the club as it sits on the ground, which then in turn affects your posture. So for instance, if I get very upright, so I'm going to get the club very flat on the ground, if anything, the heel slightly in the air, handle comes up, posture comes up, I get taller. Now this is great for making me feel like I want to hit left to right shot. So I will use the lie of the club and then in turn my posture to try and pronounce some kind of little shapes, to just try and really promote those tiny little controlled shots. You know, I've got trouble on the left, I don't want that ball turning left, so I'm going to just stand that little bit more upright and do a few things in my swing as well, but I'm going to let the stance dictate the movement pattern. And then vice versa, let's say I was going to sling this around a tree, obviously setup changes where I'm aiming, but I'm going to get the handle lower, I'm going to get the toe in the air, I'm going to try and get the face closing as much as I can to a path, and lie will do that. It will move where that face points, and then in turn it sets up a movement pattern built around some different club paths. Using lie is such a key skill for getting you to play better on the golf course, and there's a few reasons why it's a key skill, because as we know out here, it's not flat. So I'm gonna have to hit shots with the toe a bit more in the air, the toe on the ground, heel virgin in the air when the ball's below my feet and above my feet. When you get on the many different slopes that you get on out here, you need to understand the patterns of shots you hit. But even from the flat, from a teeing ground, you can use those patterns to home in your iron shots. I see lots of golfers building iron swings around very low hands, toe very much in the air, getting quite rounded and down in their postures, and then wondering again why they bottom out early or even fin the ball, don't take divots that much. And often their posture is setting you up to fail. Great rule of thumb when it comes to the lie of the club, and I want you to play around within these parameters. Try and get the club relatively flat on the floor. If you were going to be on a mat and be really precise, what you're going to notice is that the toe end just slightly peels up, because as you hit a shot, there's a bit of bowing in the shaft, and that'll pop the club flat on the ground as you strike it. So your optimum, if you've got a nice, you won't see it on the grass so much, but if you've got a really tight lie or on a mat, you want to just be able to get like a little penny or something under the toe to about here. But relatively flat is your benchmark. Too many people I teach are here. And the other reason why lots of golfers get here with their irons is because they just walk into a shop and buy a standard set of irons. They buy a standard set of irons, but they might not be the height required for those irons. So what happens then is that the toe just gets way up in the air. Lots of things happening when you're setting yourself up with the lie so inconsistently. You're either going to build your swing around those shapes, and some of them aren't good for hitting the ground where the ball's going to be. Toe in the air, you're really going to struggle when the ball's below your feet, because it's the opposite feeling. People who are good at getting the toe in the ground, getting taller, are often better when the ball's below their feet, so the ball's down there a bit more. But the other thing that happens is it's really hard to find the middle of the club, because the more you move the middle of the club away from the ground, so the more I tilt that toe up in the air, if we take it to extremes, I mean, the bottom of the club just cannot get to the ball, so people have to start trying to jam it in here, and the last thing you ever want to be doing is jamming it in there. So build your posture to a more solid foundation. You want that club relatively flat on the ground, which will put your hands in a more solid position. Little bit of give under the toe is the actual truth of where you want that, but the best way of practicing this is to practice some with your hands low, see what kind of shapes and shots you kind of produce, get your hands really high, toe in the ground, see what kind of shots you produce, and then work in your standard for me, which is around here. This is going to allow me to make actions that get the club connecting with the ground in a way that allows me to create a decent strike, hopefully make the distance, and start hitting a few more greens. Don't make these lazy mistakes. So many golfers make these lazy mistakes, and I play with them and just think, like, there's 3 shots out here if we just make sure we use these simple cheats. Let me know if it helps. Thanks for watching.